Welcome back to the TechConnect podcast. Today, we are talking about practical AI in media. Before a show reaches your screen, there's a lot of work behind it. Captions, translation, dubbing, and more. My guest, Chris Ekman, is Senior Vice President of the Africa Channel, one of the largest sources of African content in the world, with millions of viewers. We will talk about where AI helps with that work, where it still falls short, and what stays in human hands. Good morning, Chris. Welcome to the TechConnect podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited for you to be here. We met together in the Amazon ecosystem, and I've seen you around. You've been working on some really fascinating stuff in streaming and media in general, and I think this will be an excellent conversation today. So why don't we kick it off with a question around, who are you and what kind of work are you doing these days?
Yeah, so Chris Ekman, SVP of Operations and OTT Services for the Africa Channel. The Africa Channel itself has been in business. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary this year. It's a traditional linear broadcast cable network with distribution in the U.S., Canada, Caribbean. About 9 years ago, we launched a digital brand called Demand Africa, and that has our fast channels, our streaming services, and then just recently in the past year, we launched a new AI division called TAC Labs.
That's awesome. And across those forums, you've got millions of viewers. And of course, you're a household name for several cable providers. And of course, you have your on-demand streaming service. I'd like to dive in to talk a little bit about the work behind the screen and what goes into getting content ready for audiences. Before a single title that you offer reaches a viewer, there's a lot going on in the background. What, in general, does that life cycle look like, and what does that involve for you and your team?
Yeah, so before a viewer even presses play on their remote, there's a lot of work that goes into prepping all of those assets to get them ready for the viewer to watch. So you've got metadata, you've got all the artwork and thumbnails that go into it. You have, if it's a AVOD service, you've got all the ad breaks that need to get put into there. And in some cases, you have localization and dubbing for that content. And a lot of the work traditionally for that is very monotonous, time consuming. And really, like, what we've been trying to do with TAC Labs is look at that entire process, understand where the bottlenecks are, and then where AI can do the most effective work, bring that in there, and then have humans reviewing that work output from the AI.
And how do you decide which parts of that process are the best to apply AI to?
So, AI does have some limitations, but really we've focused on where it can provide the most effective use of it, particularly around those repeatable, mundane tasks. So reviewing metadata that comes in, we can automate that process and have it review the outputs from it, make sure that the metadata we receive from partners is completely validated. If there are any gaps, that it could fill that components in there. There's other components as well as processes where we're doing visual lip sync with outputs from the audio that's generated, and that process is very repetitive, where it's looking at the visual alignment of each word as a speaker says it, and then realigning that to match the mouth movements. For a human to do that, it's mind-numbingly boring. But the AI could go through and do it without any issues. And then once that work is complete, we could just have a human review those components and make sure the work is complete and good for release out to our partners.
That's awesome. I think help the viewers understand a little bit about the magnitude of content you guys are working through. Like, your platform offers, I'm sure, thousands of hours of content. Give us a little bit of insight into just the scale of data and, video content you guys are working with.
Yeah, so our platform right now has about 2,500 hours. It's one of the largest libraries of African content. And the amount of work that needs to go in there is massive. If you can imagine just the metadata alone, you've got whether or not the title is correct. You have synopses in multiple formats and links to those synopses. And sometimes those synopses are missing. And the only way to generate those is if you watch the content. But we can use AI to generate summaries and synopses and multiple links of that. So it really cuts down a lot of that work there. Because the problem with synopses is not only after you generate it, you now need someone to review that in a traditional human-based workflow. So you've got the initial writer that's writing that, and then you're going to have somebody else review that work. So if it's a 2 hour long movie, you have to have somebody sit there for 2 hours, and maybe they could speed up the playback, but um, they have to spend that time to watch it. And then you have to have somebody else that's reviewing it, make sure that they can do it correctly.
And you have to have the original engineer or creator like lining everything up in the first place, right? So it's 2 hours of content could take 10x to process, right?
Right. And then that's just on metadata. And then you have thumbnails where, you've got to have somebody watch that content and then pick where are those best thumbnails that come out from it, clip that out, resize it, crop anything out, reposition it. Um, that takes a lot of time. And that's different from somebody that's writing the synopsis. And then you also have like where to place those ad breaks, and then what are the platform requirements for where they want those ad breaks? Because TV has their own requirements. Then a lot of different streaming platforms they want ad breaks from 10 to 12 minutes or 8 to 10 minutes. And depending on where those ad breaks are, you might have to have different formats of them. But using AI to try to determine where those best natural ad breaks are that don't interrupt the program, we could do it without having to have somebody go manually watch that content and then put them in there and then make sure that everything's correct on the output.
Yeah, amazing. Let's move into talking about how you've been able to make localization of this African content into English practical. And components of that are, of course, localization and dubbing. Traditionally, those methods have been expensive and really slow. You were just talking about the complexity that goes into that. What does that cost actually mean? Does it mean that you can bring less content through if you don't have these automation and techniques? What does it mean to your viewers? What does it mean to the world? Obviously, you guys have a mission to bring this like native African content to the world. If you can't move fast enough, what does that mean for your viewers?
Yeah, so traditionally the cost of dubbing for content's been high, and it's really left a lot of content that's available and already produced um, unreachable for a lot of different markets. So really, when we started this project, we're looking at how can we lower those costs? Where's the bottlenecks within the process, and can we use AI to make that process more streamlined and effective? Um, and by doing that and leveraging the AI through there, we're able to drop down the price, but also speed up the entire process so we can get and process larger amounts of content at scale.
And in that process, while you're doing that, where is AI really good and where is it not so good? You mentioned a moment ago that AI has its limitations. Where are you seeing right now most of the limitations, and maybe where is it doing really well?
Yeah, so some of the challenge we have is with speaker identification. So as the artificial intelligence listens to the audio, we have to separate out who's speaking because we don't get usually separate audio tracks per speaker.
Hmm.
So we're working with finished content. We have to strip out and identify each speaker track, and sometimes the AI doesn't get right. And the thing is you don't want to send bad inputs to the pipeline, because the worst thing for the viewer would be to hear somebody else's voice saying the wrong line in that other speaker's voice. So in that case, we have humans review and listen to those components and make sure that it makes sense and we have a high confidence that it's the correct speaker. Um, some of the other parts that there's limitations to is the dynamic range and emotion of the generated voice. So sometimes, like if you have an actor that's crying or laughing, it's difficult to capture that to its full extent.
Wow. And to help our listeners understand, what type of assets do you typically deal with in the average package? So, in my mind, I'm guessing you have like video, and then you've got like maybe a text based file of like script, or like language, right? Of text. You mentioned, you know, the dynamic range of emotion and things and speakers. Like, what does that package look like that you're working with? Like, what does one of your video streams break out into, like, object wise?
So on the operational side, we package and deliver the content to a platform like Prime Video or Roku, and the components of that are like the media file, audio tracks, subtitles and captions, associated artwork. So you have posters, thumbnails, and then the metadata that goes along with it. So you've got the title, synopses, cast and crew, genres, tags, ratings. There's a lot that goes into the metadata to make sure that it's presented correctly on the user front end.
Interesting. And your pipeline that you're referring to helps you assemble as much of that as possible, because in order to get to those streaming platforms, you need to have that package fully, prepared and vetted.
Right. And the challenge on top of that is every platform has their own specific requirements. They might have different aspect ratios for artwork. They might have different length synopses they want. They have different formats. So it's not completely all standardized in one single package yet. They're moving towards that. But we have to do a lot of preparation and packaging for different requirements.
Great. Let's move into kind of what a lot of industry is talking about now, human in the loop. A common theme is that AI creates, and then there's a human in the loop to verify what that content looks like. How does that work in your team? How do you see that evolving? Has that been effective for you?
Yeah, so I think the important part of it is understanding the process and really mapping out that process and understanding where you could leverage AI most effectively, and then understanding where those risk points are for where you could have errors introduced by the AI, and then bring the humans to review those components. Like I mentioned earlier about the emotion component of it. So you have to bring in a human to review those parts where maybe an actor's crying, maybe they're laughing, and ensuring that those parts of it are correct. And there's also multi-layer human review. So they're also reviewing the final parts of it. And if there is like a total error in it, we'd have to start over or redo parts of it. Um, so it's this layered approach of the human review.
Interesting. Well, I think of myself watching a platform like Netflix or something, and if I ever notice an error in the content via subtitles or something, there's no way for me, at least that I know of as a user, to like give feedback that that happened. So if you have some anomaly that does make it to production, what does that look like? Do you guys discover that through feedback from users, or do you discover that on like follow-up reviews after content? Like how does that look for you? Like what's the feedback loop?
Yeah, so we do pretty thorough job of doing automated QCs and checks within the system. So we have um, processes for trying to review and catch those mistakes before they go out, and then we have humans that also review there. And then a lot of the platforms will also do automated and then human checks as well. So I think the amount of errors that come through that process is relatively low. Um, but yeah, it's um, It's a challenge, I think, to catch everything, but we do our best to try to make sure that errors are minimized as
Yeah,
best as
that
we can.
makes a lot of sense. As you think about your team being human in the loop, are there is there opportunities for an AI model to help identify like the riskiest points in a piece of content? Like, can the AI detect that this is a scene where there's a lot of laughter and this probably prioritizes human review over other scenes that may be less complex? Is that something that you think is within the reach of the model? Are you doing that today?
We're not doing that right now. There are QC points that we can detect aberrations within the voice.
Oh, interesting.
So we can detect whether or not there's glitches or other areas that we find issues with, and then we can point a human to go review that part. But we're not flagging key specific emotional parts or like areas that we would think maybe there might be problems. We're specifically looking at trying to figure out like, did we detect a problem here? And then can we automatically fix it? Can we have the AI automatically regenerate it? And then if we need to have a human double check that part that had the issues. But yeah, not currently are we looking at like pre targeting and flagging areas that we don't suspect any issues with.
That's cool, and I'm sure you're adding new components to your pipeline all the time, so that makes a lot of sense. A lot of execs I talk to, we talk about how our workforce is shifting in some aspects from doing to reviewing. And it sounds like with the massive volume of content that you're having your team process, there's great, validity in that your team is doing a lot of reviewing and maybe they're doing less of certain parts of the process where they have to do all that prep work first and then review. Um, do you feel like that's the case? And how does that change what your teams do day to day? And how does that maybe change the skills that matter to your team as you look for, the future where maybe your team's only reviewing content because this AI pipeline does such a great job with all the prep work?
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely agree that they're moving from doing to reviewing, and it's even going past reviewing to now they're directing. Now that they're adding additional value into, particularly on the content generation side. Um, but it's taking them doing from like mundane specialized tasks using video editing software or doing something in a specific tool into now reviewing that content in a pipeline and doing micro tasks. Some of the other things we're doing is um, we're creating these micro tasks that are little tiny job snippets. So listen to this one little piece of audio, review this little snippet of text, and that work you get distributed and operated at scale versus having necessarily like one person in charge of just doing that one piece of work.
Very cool. So let's shift gears into the buy versus build in the AI era. It's something that I know a lot of our audience wrestles with. I know I wrestle with it often. There's a growing sense that teams can now build tools that they used to have to buy. And I want to ask you how that looks in your space. It sounds like you're doing quite a bit of building because these solutions don't exist off the shelf.
Hmm.
How do you decide like, oh, I'm going to wait until an organization or like a startup or something can offer this to me and I can buy it versus I'm just going to use my engineering excellence and build it myself?
Yeah. So really we focus on areas where we can provide the most amount of value in improving the process and really keep those solutions that we might buy to being more like generic solutions that aren't really providing any value. Particularly like as we look at our dubbing pipeline and the specialized understanding of how our unique workflows are. And that's really where we're adding the additional value in that process workflow that's specialized for our team and the value that our company can bring. And then looking at other solutions out there, and building like an end-to-end solution from when an asset comes in off of a contract, moving that content and data from the contract through the entire pipeline to delivering that piece of content to a platform. Um, Traditionally, like if we had an off-the-shelf SaaS solution, most of those processes are defined, and we have to conform to how that SaaS solution was designed and built and the interfaces that it had with it. But with the advent of and some of the cool AI tools we could use to accelerate building, we're able to build those solutions in-house and go from the start of our process where we first touch a piece of asset and sign it into a contract to deliver it and ensure that every one of those components is customized to how we actually do work and how we think the work's done most effectively, rather than just taking something off the shelf and then we're working towards somebody else's thing. And that's where we really think most of the value can come from. Um,
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. There's bespoke choices you can make when you author it yourself, and with AI coding tools, you can accelerate to that outcome. So I don't quite think SaaS apocalypse is completely valid, but I do find myself building in some scenarios more than I'm buying. We'll see how that continues to evolve. What is a common mistake you see when teams try to build their own tooling like that? Are you finding that you're essentially like product managing your own product internally? Are you finding that that's a different skill set than your typical engineer has, and you've had to manage roadmap for your own internal products? How are you handling it? How do you negotiate what you build with your stakeholders? I mean, it's complex, right?
Yeah, no, it's complex, but it's rewarding because we're working internally with the teams that are getting the work done and understand and have an immense amount of knowledge around the process and how best that they want to do it. And a lot of them have all this wish list of things that they wish they could have been doing, that they were limited with what solution software that they had before. Now they're like, okay, we can implement this thing that's going to save them all this time. That's the way that we work versus like, oh, like it was pushed off because it wasn't a high priority on the other software that we're using.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about where this goes next. So when we design AI from the start, um, that's one thing, but most AI work today is retrofitting into flows that we already have that already exist. What changes when you're able to design a workflow around AI agents from the beginning? And maybe are there workflows that you're trying to retrofit that are tricky? Are you seeing it on both sides?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is you have, you know, uh, when you're retrofitting something or even starting to experiment within using AI in the workplace, and you might start with using Claude or ChatGPT or some other chat interface to try to generate content, generate synopses, do some work. And then you have to take that content and then go put it into like an Excel sheet. And you kind of like uh, manage to accelerate some of your own personal work. But when you take that process and then look at it with like an agentic design, where the entire process is really defined within software, you can manage all of those flows. And instead of having a human have to prompt all that stuff, you can get quite a bit of efficiency. And then with skills and whatnot, you could build different agents within that workflow to do the review and process and handoff, and then also manage the human in the loop review for it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to double click on the point there that you made where humans chatting with AI in a turn-based conversation unlocks a certain amount of efficiency. Like if they want to run a analysis on an Excel file, right, then that unlocks a certain amount of efficiency. But when you can break it into an agentic chain of agents that can be automatically invoked by a workflow,
Hmm.
there's now, well, if that Excel file in a turn-based chat is 1x performance increase, then, agentic workflows for that specific work stream or task can be 10x easily, right? So I think a lot of organizations are often working towards chat and turn-based conversations, but the horizon is full agentic flows. That's where they're going to see the real ROI with AI flows in their investments.
Yeah, and we've been working on a model of a media company that's fully autonomous. And we have a demo we're going to be presenting today here. And it's a fully autonomous podcast company. And what it does is it does all of the research, all the writing. There's a memory system built within there that understands what the tone of every writer is, past episodes that they've done. There's a editorial agent that ensures that it's on brand, and then it produces that entire podcast, then distributes it across the internet.
Why are we even here, Chris?
I don't
know. We should be using that to build this podcast.
Maybe that'll be the next one.
That's right. I hate to break it to you all. This is actually AI Chris and Chris here talking to you today. Excellent. Looking out a few years, what do you think practical AI media operation looks like that it doesn't look like today? Is there something that you're really excited about on the horizon that you just can't accomplish today that you would like to see happen in the future?
We're really excited about the future of voice generation and where we can really get it to capture the full emotional range and performance of the original actor. So we could really ensure that when we do this dubbing, that it has the best performance and is true to life from the original source content.
Yeah, because that'll encapsulate the personality of the actor, the emotion of the actor in the right ways. That's great. So let's wrap it up here. Let's talk about maybe a piece of advice for a founder or an operator that is deciding where they want to start with AI. So you picked up AI for media, you made some choices along the way. Looking backwards, what advice would you give to someone starting on that journey?
Yeah, I think the best place to start is choose a process where you've got a lot of big time-consuming parts in there that are inefficient today, and identify within that process where AI can get leveraged, and then start small and iterate on that to see what improvement gains you can get.
And while you're working on these exciting things, where can people follow what you're working on next?
Yeah, so you could follow on our website on the Africa channel, and you could see our content in Demand Africa. And then, just keep an eye out for what we're doing at TAC Labs.
Excellent.
This podcast is brought to you by Human Studio. Human Studio is an award-winning design studio specializing in web design, branding design, video production, and so much more. We'd love to help you take your brand to the next level.
Thank you for listening to the TechConnect podcast. Don't forget to stay connected and explore more at www.socaltechforum.org. We'll see you next time.